Welcome back, Acacia readers, to another episode of Storytime on the Magic Carpet with me, Acacia. Yeah. Today we're going to be reading The Castle on Hester Street by Linder Heller. Now, I heard that you guys already met someone from this book. Y'all met Grandma Rose? With her southern twang, even though she's from Russia. She was telling you about this book and her granddaughter and her husband. Well, she told you about the book, but now I'm going to read it. So go ahead and do as we always do. Grab your magic carpet. My carpet is here. And don't forget your acacia crown. Put your crown on high. And let's get ready to read. But I got one favor. Before we get started, go ahead and hit that like button. It's down below. And hit that subscribe button. It's over beside it. And when we're done, share it. All right, let's get started. The Castle on Hester Street. And this is my first time doing it without cameraman Jay, so I want to make sure you guys can see the picture, so I may be all in it. Can you guys see that? Yeah. One day, while Julie was visiting her grandparents, her grandfather said, Did I ever tell you about my good friend Moshe? You told me about Herschel, the famous astronomer, Julie said with a giggle. The one who discovered that the moon was a matzah? And you told me about Betsy, your little cousin whose braids were so long she used them for jump ropes. But you never told me about Moshe. I'm hoping you guys can see that good. I have a little glare from the sun. Moshe the goat was from my village in Russia, Julie's grandfather said. He pulled the wagon I rode in when I came to America. Not only could Moshe leap across oceans the way others jumped over puddles, but he could also sing. He started singing the moment we left Russia. 9,092 miles to go. 9,092 miles. After we passed that small patch of snow. 9,091 miles to go. Julie was about to join in singing when her grandmother said, So, what are you telling that child? A true story. Just the way I remember it, Rose. Julie's grandfather said. Moshe's wagon was solid gold. It shone like a shooting star when we flew over the ocean. That's a story, all right. But it's not true, Julie's grandmother said. Grandpa came over here on a boat, just like I did. It was terrible. Hundreds of families were crowded together. Babies were crying. Bundles were piled over. The boat rocked so much, I thought we would drown. But in Russia, life for Jews were very hard. We couldn't live or work where we wanted. Sometimes we were attacked just because we were Jews. We had to leave Russia in any way we could. As her grandmother spoke, the pictures grew in Julie's mind of her grandparents leaving their country, crossing a rough winter's ocean on a boat so crowded they could hardly move. See all of those people on the boat? Grandpa, is that how you really came? Julie asked, looking sad. Yes, it was, Julie's grandfather said. He too looked sad until he added, But what a welcome I got when I arrived. President Theodore Roosevelt rode in his horse through a blizzard of ticker tape to greet me. "Hello, Saul," he said. "Mighty glad you would come." "Don't listen to another word," Julie's grandmother said. "Grandpa's brother Morris met him. The boat docked first at Ellis Island. We sat for hours and waited to be inspected. Not everyone who came could stay. If you were sick, you had to go back. I was so afraid they would find something wrong with me, but thank God I passed every test." "Hooray!" shouted Julie. "Thank you, dear," Julie's grandmother said. She gave her a kiss and said, "I have something to show you." Then she went to the closet. And this is everyone getting checked. Julie's grandfather leaned closer and whispered to Julie, "Everyone who came here was given a castle. Mine was on Hester Street. It was so tall, the pigeons couldn't fly all the way to the roof. I had to carry them." Julie's grandmother came back to the sofa carrying a box. "Did Grandpa tell you about the horrible little room he shared with Louis, the cigar maker? And Herman, the tailor?" she asked as she sat down. In those days, people had to take in boarders to help pay the rent. Life was hard. Grandpa had a push cart. He sold so many buttons, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. He only got rest on the Sabbath. "Poor Grandpa," Julie said. She patted him on the head. Y'all see me patting? Julie's grandfather was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "But what buttons I had! Buttons carved from diamonds, emeralds, and rubies. Buttons as big as saucers. Buttons as big as plates. Buttons you could use as sleds in the snow." Those are some big buttons. Oh, did I show the picture? Julie's grandmother sighed loudly. "Grandpa sold small buttons, small enough to fit through buttonholes. I'll show you," she said as she opened the box. The box was filled with photographs. Julie's grandmother took out an old photograph in a cardboard frame. In it, Julie's grandfather stood next to his push cart. It was full of little buttons. "Grandpa looked so strong," Julie said, feeling proud. Julie's grandfather found a photograph of a young girl and showed it to Julie. "This is a picture of your grandmother," he said. "She was very famous in those days." Everyone spoke of Mr. Whitkin's beautiful daughter Rose, who stayed home all day nibbling chocolates. Her 5 big brothers had to watch so that nobody stole her away. I worked 6 days a week in a factory. I worked 6 days a week in a factory then, sewing dresses. But I was very pretty, Julie's grandmother said, smoothing her hair. "You are still very pretty," Julie's grandfather said, and he kissed her cheek. "In Russia, your grandmother sewed for royalty. She made stitches so small they couldn't be seen. People wondered how the dresses stayed together. That part is true, Julie's grandmother said proudly. Let's show the picture. As soon as I met your grandmother, I wanted to marry her, Julie's grandfather said. Every night, I hired fireflies to fly over her house and spell out, Rose, my precious flower, I love you every hour. And Moshe and I sang love songs under her window. See all those fireflies? Finally, her father let me marry her. A year later, your mother was born. No one had ever seen such a beautiful child. Then Esther, Ruthie, and Benny were born, and they were just as beautiful. I made them tiny jewel crowns, and they rode through the streets in hand-carved golden baby carriages. Fancy. Enough is enough, Julie's grandmother said. From now on, I insist that Julie hears only the truth. Grandpa and I had to work even harder to feed all those babies, but we didn't mind. We had something more valuable than jewel crowns and golden baby carriages. We had each other, and we were free to live as we wanted. That's the truth, Rose dear, Julie's grandfather said. And from now on, that's all I will pass through my lips. They sat quietly for a few minutes. Then Julie's grandfather smiled and whispered to Julie, Did I ever tell you about the time Moshe the goat and I sang for President Wilson? The end. Look at all those buttons. A true story, just the way I remember it. So I hope you guys really enjoyed that story. I did too. I learned a lot about how to treat other people. I learned about the Jewish history, and I learned that sometimes you have to use a bit of an imagination to make things fun during hard times. So, hope to see you guys soon.